Hey, everybody, and welcome to Outpost Gray. I see the chat already filling up, so thank you all for showing up today. And if you're watching this recorded, you're still going to have a great time with us. So thank you again, Outpost Gray. It's a YouTube channel designed to provide you information in cybersecurity, innovation, and technology. I'm your host, Jack Scott, and each week I come to you live on Thursdays to provide you education through the use of panels, firesides, just like today, and one-on-one interviews. So today is really an exciting day because it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart. We're going to be talking about veterans transition, and what better way of doing it than bringing in experts who have gone through the transition themselves, who help veterans that are transitioning, and who are preparing for their own transition. And all of these experts are in the cybersecurity space, so make sure to bring your questions to them. But I know we started a little bit late, so I'm not going to do a big intro. I'm just going to hop into it and go ahead and get our guest onto the show. So here we go. Bam! How are you guys? Welcome to Outpost Gray. How are you feeling? James, Charmaine, Tom?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. Great to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jax.
Charmaine, I don't know. Test your audio again. I didn't
Can you hear me?
Oh, I do.
Now?
Yay.
Okay, awesome.
Super exciting. So let's do a quick round robin before we jump in and have each of you share your background, your military experience, and how you got into the cybersecurity space. I'm going to start with James.
So I joined the British Army straight from school. I was 17 years old. I served for approximately 10 years in the infantry, and then moved into the intelligence world. And then when I left, I took that military experience in intelligence straight into cyber threat intelligence, doing strategic cyber threat stuff. And I did that for central government in the UK before starting my role as CEO of Tech Vets in January 2020. And basically, Tech Vets helps people transition into cyber careers.
And I cannot wait till we jump into Tech Vets, because that is one thing that we're definitely going to talk about. So thank you for that, James. Charmaine, if you would.
Yeah, so I transitioned in 2016 from active duty Air Force. And, really in my Air Force career, I had a wide variety of jobs or roles. I started out in plans for civil engineers, so planning and scheduling for civil engineers. And then I actually transitioned into aviation management, so planning, flight scheduling, resource management for pilots and air crew. And then right before I got out, I transitioned into a career advisor role. So as an enlisted career advisor, my role was to support enlisted retention. And throughout, my 10-year active duty career, I had obtained a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, bachelor's in strategic communications, and then my master's in org design and development. And I had just reached a point where I felt like I had kind of almost reached a ceiling for growth and was really just looking for more in terms of ways in which I could be challenged. So my transition into cybersecurity actually didn't happen until I got into the commercial space in consulting. So I'm excited to share a little bit more about that, but thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can't wait to dig into the consulting side. Just so everybody knows, Charmaine is the first Grant Thornton employee coming in here. So I'm pretty excited. You're the first one. That's awesome. And if anybody doesn't know, Grant Thornton and Outpost Gray has a partnership. So it's pretty great. All right, Tom, I know your story is a little bit unique, and you can share a little bit about it because you haven't transitioned yet, but you have a very unique viewpoint and obviously VetSec. So if you would share your background, your amazing background.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jax. Like James, I enlisted in the military 17 years old right out of high school back in 2001. I was in boot camp for 9/11 and, stayed in ever since. I've served on submarines in the U.S. Navy, in the nuclear power field for the last 20 years. I'm just over 20 years now, and my retirement from the Navy's pending. for about a year and a half out, and I'm actively working on that transition myself. Also, in June of 2020, I came onto the board at VetSec, which, like Tech Vets, works to help military veterans in the United States transition into cybersecurity. And I've been volunteering as the board chair since June of 2020.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I love the foundation. I'm a big advocate of VetSec. I can't wait for VetSec Con 2022. It's awesome. So we'll dive into that too, but I want to pivot. This is going to be a question for James and Charmaine. I want to talk about the transition piece because you both have done it and I have my experience. Charmaine, you and I have similar experiences in the fact that we did our transition. I call it baby stepping. We went from active duty to reserve/guard. And then we got full-time jobs where some people do their 20 plus years and then they get out and there's even more of a shock factor out of that. So it was still a hard transition. Mine was unique in that way, but I'm glad that I did it. It's been easier. But for you guys, can you think of something that when you did your transition from the military into the civilian sector that you were like, wow, this is really challenging? And like, how did you get around that? How did you adjust? Charmaine, I'm going to ask you that question first.
Sure. So, I mean, I would say the first piece of it was translating my resume and my military resume into civilian speak. I mean, the terms and nomenclature so different, right? You know, from things like the way in which we reference finance and budget from a military perspective, it's just very different from the civilian or commercial sector. Even when it comes to like systems that we use, right? So we might have, you know, acronyms and alphabet soup from a military perspective, and we know what systems that we've leveraged. We know those systems in and out, front end and back end, but we might not understand the developer, right? Like who developed it, what the foundational, system is for that, said acronym system that we use, right? So really getting to know and translating all of that military speak into civilian speak was probably number one most challenging. And then the second piece was really changing my mindset from being like a doer of work and listening and following orders to being able to develop strategies and ways in which to execute work on my own. And actually working autonomously for myself. So, at least in my experience in the commercial space or in the private space outside of the military, I'm given, freedom to get to the end on my own. So it's really more outcome based than process based. And so, feeling comfortable and I guess having the freedom and being empowered to take my own ideas and applying them to day-to-day work was a bit challenging because I was used to doing things by the book, how a process was stated, how leadership told me to do it. So I would say that was those two items would be the most difficult.
Yeah, and we're going to dive into both of those because I think those are both big. They're very challenging for a lot of people, especially the civilian resume, in which we're going to dive into that because I want to know some tips and tricks from definitely James and Tom with everything that you guys are doing on the resume side. But also talking about the autonomous side and having that autonomy that you didn't have in the military can be really scary. So for you, James, when you transitioned out, can you think of one or two things that really was, wow, this is hard? Like you really thought about it. You're like, this is really challenging being a civilian.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, before I left, the most challenging part of that process was understanding where I fit, where I was going to fit, what role I would be suited to, what sort of company. And I didn't really have an idea. I was quite lucky in a sense. I mean, I was blown up back in one of the early Afghans, and my injuries meant that I was always going to leave at some point. So I'd forged a career into intelligence and planned ahead. And I had a 5-year plan, an exit strategy, if you will. And the one thing that worked really well is I made sure that I networked incredibly hard. It was almost like a second full-time job networking, even while I was serving. And additionally, I made sure I had as many mentors as I could from different backgrounds, in different roles, at different levels, different types of people that could help me on my way. But even then, by the time I was coming to leave, even that 5-year plan, which I managed to execute, it was still really challenging, because it wasn't as simple. There's all different industries, and cyber, you can be in any industry. It doesn't really matter. Cyber fits across everything. And what sort of role, what types of roles out there would be something that my skill set would fit to. And all the networking didn't really give me a specific answer. So that was still very challenging. When I left, the initial sort of 6 months, it was a bit of a wake-up call. And I think for everyone who's listening in, the one thing that you could take that's really positive from this is the fact that I left and I felt kind of concerned that I was the only person in the room. Every meeting I went to, every problem that was being solved, every time there was an issue of any sort, I felt like I was the only one there that actually was calm enough to do anything about it. Everyone else was panicking. People were taking mental health days because they'd had a difficult night's sleep, or we'd had a change of missions mid-quarters. And everything for me just seemed really simple. It was really easy. We just get on with it and do it. There was a load of people that were incredible at what they did, and just putting those together was something that we were used to doing. Multidisciplinary teams. We had a mission, an outcome, and an achievement that we needed to get to, with limited resources, which we're always used to in the military, and always with adversity. And it just was really easy. But the challenge was getting used to that culture, and having a culture where leaders weren't really leaders. That was another thing. Difficult to really find someone who was able to be confident, stand up, make a decision, and stick by that decision, be accountable for that. Quite often, everything was hiding behind a Slack message, rather than getting up in a room in front of everyone, keeping everyone on a level, keeping them calm, and leading them through a problem. So I think that beforehand, it was knowing where I would fit, and in the first 6 months, it was adjusting to the culture.
I think the culture was probably one of the hardest things for me. Analogy I always use is we all speak English, and I left the military speaking English. I went into the civilian sector speaking English, yet I was not understood in the same way, which I think a lot of that also had to do with being a woman in the military. There are certain ways that you have to act. We suppress our emotions. Like you don't have empathy, at least from where I was standing, because I was working in the SOCOM space, and I really projected myself with my masculine energy. And when I came into the civilian sector, it was extremely challenging for me because that didn't mesh well with that new culture. And like you said, James, there were a lot of I don't want to use the word weaker, but it was a different culture, and the mindset was different, where I would place mission first, and then somebody would call in because they had a bad night of sleep, like you said. So it was like trying to figure out how to navigate this new culture without getting super frustrated.
Yeah, but I suppose the other way to look at it as well is, I was in a team that had incredible technologists in it. I mean, they were incredible, but they were very specific about what they wanted to do and what they could do. Whereas in the military, even if you're a specialist, you're still a generalist in comparison, because you're trained to be a military person first, which includes everything. You may work on a computer, 10 hours a day. You're still trained with weapon systems and vehicles and comms gear and everything else. And I think that ability to adjust to whatever's coming our way, when we're faced with people that are very specific technologists, is also kind of unnerving. When these people are doing stuff and this code is hammering down the screen, and you're thinking, wow, what's going on? I don't really understand the process here.
Mm-hmm.
The benefit is it doesn't take us that long to find that out, to work through those issues and to understand and develop quite quickly. Promotion tends to be quicker. The ability to gel the team, it's a bit quicker. And all of a sudden, once you've found your feet, that's it. You're in your stride. And there's loads of different ways. I'm sure we'll come on to it, but there's loads of ways in which you can start to find your fit. And I noticed someone on there said it is really difficult to find your place, and it was. But the problem that I had is that I didn't have the hindsight that I have now, which is the benefit that you can go anywhere and do anything. If you're going into cyber, you can be a very non-technical person in cyber. You can be the most technical person in the world. And at the same time, you can start off by thinking, what industry am I really passionate about? Do I have a real passion for combating climate change and going into green tech? Do I want to work in renewables? Do I want to work in healthcare and med tech? Do I want to be part of something that's changing the way society lives? In which case, fine, that's your start point, and you're going down the right path. Then you can look for companies that have the right size and culture and mission and vision, the ones that are working with the right tech stack that's going to suit you. And at that point, all of a sudden, you're finding yourself in the right place without really doing much work. And then, once you've done that job, actually the role is less relevant to the culture of the team that you're in, the company. That tends to be a bit more important for people leaving the military.
I love that. That's a very good point. I want to pivot, and I want to ask Charmaine a question, and I want to have it from the lens of being a female in the military. When you transitioned out and you were in the space and you were working in the civilian sector, did you notice that you had to change the way that you communicated so you didn't come off overly aggressive?
I think I'm just a really laid back person to begin with. So I fortunately didn't have to really change too much of like my way of communicating with people. I would say, from like in my transition, I had come from Texas and then moved up to the DC area. And I would say it was really more a cultural shift. I found that my experience with women in DC was that people were very independent and strong and confident, especially when I transitioned to the consulting space, like brilliant women all over the consulting industry, from, healthcare consulting to technology consulting. And what I find in the consulting space is that women are very direct and confident, and it works. So, only speaking from my experience, but I haven't had to shift the way I speak since I've at least transitioned.
That's awesome. Yeah, I should have gone into consulting first before now, because I feel the same way. I feel like you have to be direct. You have a limited amount of time with the client. There's no time for BS. You need to get straight to the point, and you save the client time that way. And you're a very confident woman, so I wouldn't have thought otherwise of you. And I can totally see you being a very laid back person in the Air Force and just get the job done. No big deal. I love that. Okay, so we're going to pivot, and Tom, I'm bringing you're on the hot seat now. I want to go back to something Charmaine said, because this is a topic that we hear a lot of times as a challenge for veterans, including myself, is the resume. Like, how do you perfect that resume? And I know there's some resources out there to help the veterans with getting that right resume to transition what they've done in the military into the civilian sector. So I'd love for you to share some things that you guys are doing at VetSec, because you have a Slack channel, you support veterans in helping them with their resume reviews. But if you could share some insights, what are you doing at VetSec about the resume reviews, anything?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think James, has a very similar approach over at TechVets. We both try and stay very community focused. I think both of our communities are very much about the people who have already transitioned, giving back. And in my Slack channel in VetSec, we focus on resume review as kind of a groupthink methodology. So, we have some best practices that we share with members. We've kind of built those into a course in our learning management system, a template, and kind of just some best practices on how to translate it. And then we encourage our members to share their resume in the VetSec community and kind of let us tear it apart a little bit and help them build it. Some of our members give very direct feedback on their resumes. And some of them, give them some more softballs to work on. But I think by the time that, you've had 30 people or 40 people who have all transitioned take a stab at giving a cut on a resume, you get a very clean product at the end.
What are some of can you provide any examples, or do you have maybe the top one or two things that you typically see a veteran do wrong on a resume? Is it not doing an executive summary? Is it putting way too much military stuff up front? What are typically the things that you see that you're like, ugh, probably don't need to do that?
Yeah, both of those. But really, being able to put what you've accomplished into a measurable, quantifiable format, and then an executive summary that isn't just what your last eval said on your way out the door, but is, I am this person, I have these skills, and I'm looking for this job. Clear cut to the point. Those are kind of the two big things. I
love that. Okay, and James, I'm going to pivot it over to you, because I know that you have some stuff to say around this, especially with what you do with tech vets. But what insights do you have on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, Tom hit the nail on the head. It's the achievements, the accomplishments. Most of the CVs that we see are almost like job descriptions, and because people aren't potentially getting the right advice when they're leaving. So we've got this, a load of stuff on there. I do this, I do this, I do this. But that's the people aren't telling the potential hiring managers how they're going to add value to the organisation they're potentially joining. So it's how you can turn what you do into money, percentages, time, capability development, using process. And usually the best way to do it is to say, one line, here's my job, here's what I do as part of this unit, and then bullet points of achievement after achievement. I did this using this process, and here was the outcome, here was the achievement. I managed the intelligence requirements process in which we used customer-centric approach, and by making sure that we did X, Y, and Z, we increased decision-making effectiveness by X%. And there's ways in which you can do it. Even someone in the infantry on the ground doing range days, you know how many rounds you're firing, you know what the changing capability is. If you're running a range, you know how many rounds you've brought back, and you can go to your quartermasters and work that out. You can get a cost for how much that is, and then you can make that percentage calculation on capability development. But even down to things like your skills and drills on the ground and that sort of stuff, it's process. Everything we do in the military is process. You've got stuff you can use. If you've got one less person in your team, what's the salary? If you've achieved what you needed to for that year, then you've saved that much money and still hit the objective. So that's the accomplishments is definitely one of them. The other one that we see a lot of is a combination of not using a cover letter when they can, but also within the CV part of it, not putting in everything they need to give a more rounded picture of themselves. Cover letters are incredibly useful. It gives you a whole new page, and that's where you can really sell yourself. And as a veteran, you'll have a big story to tell. That sort of character is what they're looking for. Operational delivery, all of those principled sort of soft skills that you have. But then making sure you're talking about the additional stuff you do. And I know at VetSec, you've got a community full of people doing hack the box and try hack meets and all these other things. Capture the flag competitions. Get those things down. If you're a member of VetSec, put that on your CV because it shows you're part of a body, a group where you're constantly surrounded by a network that's got deep links into industry, and you're constantly doing that professional development. And it just shows that buy-in that you have to the sort of profession you're going into.
Do you all do networking events with tech vets that bring not only veterans together, but hiring managers in the industry to hire veterans and connect them with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of the time there's no need. I can bolt on to other ones. We can push people towards all the events that are happening because the UK is really small in comparison, so it's not difficult for people to travel. But yes, we've got one coming up on the 28th of this month, and the idea is you have some nice interest and awareness and education talks. We've got two companies, CDW and Fortinet, who you'll all know about, big supporters of veterans, and they're going to talk about the opportunities within their companies. Fortinet's got a large partner ecosystem, huge number of opportunities, but also the opportunity to get someone from our CV review group, one of our veterans, to talk about CV hints and tips. And then networking. You've always got to have networking drinks afterwards. Free beers is, it coerces people into coming in the first place.
I love that. Awesome, coercing people. I have to bring this up really quick. This is for Charmaine. I don't know if you saw it in the chat, but it kind of made me laugh. Dave dropped this in there. I can speak from his experience. Charmaine has no problem being direct. That's awesome.
Oh, that's so nice. Thank you, Dave.
I have a question from Kimberly, question/statements. I feel like directness is something the military teaches you. Is that true? It's not always polite in the civilian world to be direct, especially for women, but learning. Who wants to take that? Charmaine, I think that's a good question for you with a female lens.
I mean, the military is a very large employer and the organization is huge. So everyone's experience is going to vary, where they go. When I was working with civil engineers, I was one female of about 400 people in an organization. So naturally, I did have to speak a little differently, be a little bit more, I guess, assertive in the way I worked. And I knew how to set boundaries because I was in this very large organization, being one of 5 females. When I transitioned into the aviation management role, I was in an organization of majority women. So, the environment was a little bit different. And from like that direct speaking manner, I think, maybe naturally we are taught to be direct, but we're also taught that there's a right way to do it, right? Mm-hmm. There's a difference between being direct and rude. And I think that comes with, improving leadership skills and just really maturing as you go throughout your career.
I love that answer. And that is a great segue into another follow-up that Kim actually asked for both of us.
Yeah, sorry, before we go into that.
I
do have one point to add. And I know as a bloke, clearly, I don't understand what it's like for a woman to be direct. Yeah. But I find with the military, we are taught to be direct, but not to our superiors. And I think that's the difference when you leave the military. And we tend to be quite the opposite in the military. We would never be direct to someone who is a rank above us or a couple of ranks above us. Mm. Whereas outside of the military, you absolutely need to be direct. Especially in cybersecurity, because you could be that specialist in the room and the superior may not be a technical specialist. So they'll be relying on you to be direct, to step in. But as Charmaine said, I mean, there's no need to be rude about things. There's clearly a huge gap between being direct and being rude. But I think definitely, especially if you're a woman, that you shouldn't be looking at this like because you're a woman, you need to be direct. As a person, as a professional, you need to be direct. Men are terrible for it when they leave the military as well. They just don't have that sort of that confidence to speak to someone and go for it all guns blazing. They would rather please because they're used to doing that. They wouldn't go and speak to their boss and say, "I want that next job. I want that promotion." So being a bit more confident and being direct is definitely something that I would recommend.
Mm-hmm. Tom, do you want to add anything?
I just completely agree with what James said. I'm actually an introvert, but over the last 20 years in the military, they've taught me to be able to, I guess, as I've come up technically, be able to speak confidently about those things. But for so many people that are making that transition out of the military, they suffer from, what we'll colloquially call imposter syndrome, where they're one, trying to figure out the benefits process to get their disability. They're 2, trying to figure out where they're going to live. They're 3, trying to figure out where their job's going to go next. And then, I know James sees it too. I get a lot of people who say, I want to be in cybersecurity, but then I ask, okay, what in cybersecurity do you want to do? And then it's kind of that deer in the headlights of, oh, there's more things than being a hacker. So there's all those things that can erode that confidence and can lead people to not want to be as direct. Absolutely, don't be rude about it, but you got to be able to speak up.
Mm-hmm. I think there's an education piece to it too, like educating yourself on the organization, the individual that you're going to be talking with, engaging with, having that higher EQ. So I want to pivot to this other question. It's still on a similar topic. It was directed to Charmaine and us. For women specifically, and for a woman that is not in the military, how would you advise to start becoming more direct instead of always pleasing and finding the balance? And for me, because I was overly direct, I actually had to kind of tone it down because of the area that I came from in the military. And I think the easiest thing for me was restructuring how I was being direct. So I'm still direct, but I ask questions. That's my magic power now, is I just ask a lot of questions typically. And then through that, it builds rapport. It's showing that you're desiring. And Charmaine, we talked about this yesterday, the difference between smart question or good questions and bad questions. And so I'll typically come into the situation asking those smart questions. So doing the research about the individual, the organization, or the topic, or the thing that I need to address without just coming straight in and just going directly at it. There's a finesse about it that's how I've done it. I don't know, Charmaine, what about you? You've definitely been in this space, in the consulting space, a lot longer than me. So I'd love to hear your background of how you work with all these different clients all the time with different personalities.
Yeah, I mean, in consulting, it's a little different from being in an operational role, right? When you're in an operational role, you're performing day-to-day work to keep the lights on. Typically, you have a mission in mind, right? You're working towards accomplishing that goal. In consulting, you're in an advisory capacity. So you have to be confident, you have to be an expert, you have to do your research. So, when I'm responding to clients or communicating with colleagues, I'm very honest about what I know, what I don't know. But I always will work to get the answer, right? So if a client is asking for a specific answer, or like if they want to know something specifically and I don't know it right off the bat, you have to confidently say, you know what, I don't know that answer, but I will get that for you, in X amount of time, right? But at the end of the day, from a cybersecurity consulting perspective, you are the expert. You need to do your due diligence. You have to do research. And the only way to remain confident in being direct is when you know your stuff, right? So cybersecurity is an ever-changing domain, right? From new policies that are implemented recently, right? Biden published an executive order on cybersecurity, which really those policy that drives the future of the industry. It drives the future of what companies are doing internally within their cybersecurity operations, right? So understanding what's happening from, at the very top level, at that, policy level is really important so that you can know and pinpoint where you need to do your research so you can get that experience and expertise in order to provide that advisory support to clients.
I love that. And that is such great insight. And I want to just highlight something that Charmaine said that I think is really critical is know your topic, whatever that is. If you're a red teamer, if you're a blue teamer, if you're in GRC, make sure that you're staying abreast of the ever-changing information that is coming out. You can do that through First Thing First on every weekday on Simply Cyber. You like that? I did a plug for you, Gerald. But stay connected, and then you'll start to build that confidence. 100% agree with you, Charmaine. And you have such finesse. Is that finesse with your directness? Do you feel like you have developed that because you developed the confidence in this space where now you are confident with saying, I don't know that, and you don't have to say sorry about it. You're just, I don't know that, but I'll get the answer to you. Is that from time?
So one thing that I think when we were talking a little bit about, experiences as like a female practitioner or female veteran versus male, one thing that I've kind of just noticed, from myself and male colleagues is like the level of confidence people have, right? I am not coming into cyber, I wasn't an experienced cyber practitioner. I never once called myself a cyber expert, right? Like I don't know everything in cyber. Cyber is a huge domain. There are so many things you can do. I think James mentioned earlier, you don't necessarily have to be a technical person to know cybersecurity, to do cybersecurity, or you can be super technical, right? And so I think it's really, at least my approach has always been, I'm going to do my research, and like really over the last 5 years or so, I've been drinking out of the fire hose, right? Reading as much as I can, immersing myself into the work. When I first got into cybersecurity, I didn't say like, hey, I know this all right. But I did take time to like research and read, ask questions, I sought out mentors. Dave Cimprini, the cybersecurity partner at Grant Thornton, who I work under, has been, my number one mentor. He's really guided me throughout my entire career in cybersecurity. And I think, just for advice for other veterans, definitely, seek out mentors, seek out, people who you see as somebody you'd like to emulate your career after, right? Again, like cybersecurity is super broad. You could be a technical person. You could go be an ethical hacker. You could support, a red team, blue team, or you could be like me on the back end of things, or not the back end, but really more on the policy side of stuff and helping organizations set the foundation for their cybersecurity programs. So I think it's really about understanding what's out there and where your skills align, really at the end of the day, what you want to do. And that finesse will come over time, because you're going to get that experience as you work through your roles or experience many roles that you engage in.
That's a really good point around the mentors. I think the mentors are one of the most important things you can have. The ability, especially if you're a female, a good thing to do is to find someone who's already been successful or has a relative, sort of level of success, and use them as a sounding board. If someone that you can go and talk to and say, look, I've got this problem. I'm struggling with my confidence. I don't know how to be direct. Run through some exercises with them. It's a very safe space for you to be in, where nothing's going to go wrong. You're just having a chat with someone who really wants to support you. But that person needs to be the right person. They will draw the stuff out of you and empower you to do it yourself if you get the right mentor. So that's really important. I think the second thing to consider, we talk about being direct and having finesse. Cybersecurity is 100% about diplomacy, influence, and leverage at every level. If you're working in an operational team, you've got to go to another part of the business and tell them they're going to pay money for you to have access to their log files and to do stuff where they don't want to. It's going to take time and effort from them as well as cost. You've got to try and convince them to do it. Or if you're a consultant and you're trying to sell something, a salesperson, you're trying to sell something. If you're a consultant, you're going out and you're trying to help someone solve a problem when they don't even know what the problem is themselves and what the requirement is themselves. Lots of these soft skills need to happen, and that's where directness comes into play. But absolutely, everything else that you've learned in your military career about how to be diplomatic when you're talking to a superior officer is wrong, but you've just got to play it down so you don't go in too passionately. That's really important. And the final point, to help you get your head around where you're going to be when you leave the military, there are 3 levels that I would regard, and it's very important to understand where you're going to start off, because that will set you up on the right level. If you have no cybersecurity background, then you've got to settle that you're going to be a beginner. You have to give yourself some time to learn how to deliver best practice. Once you're delivering best practice by default, then all of a sudden you're a practitioner. And then further down the line, however many years or months it takes you, if you are then shaping best practice for industry, then you're an expert. You've already become an expert in the military because you've done so much training, so much operational stuff. It's been such a focus. Outside, it's not quite the same. So you've got to be patient. You've got to give yourself time. But those soft skills and a mentor will help you overcome a lot of problems.
God, I love soft skills. Yeah. And we're going to talk on the soft skills. Tom, I wanted to see, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I can't help but also clue in on the mentorship piece.
Yeah.
There are 2 approaches to kind of gaining knowledge about the transition that I think have worked really well. The first is, the community, where you throw a question out and you get 50 answers back, rapid fire, quick and easy. And that's the technical piece. That's I have a specific question, but there's also that relationship building, and that goes so much into the soft skills around professional networking as you work to transition out. And one thing that surprised me so much about figuring out my own path was how important networking is. And it's not just creating a profile on LinkedIn and throwing your resume on it. It is researching the industry, figuring out where you want to go, talking to those people in those companies that you aspire to join, and learning more about it and making an actual personal connection out there. That's where people are successful. I hear so many stories about people who I've applied to 200 jobs and I only got 2 calls for managers and they never went to interviews. But then I hear the stories of the person who knows people, has talked to people in the industry, and a job opening comes up, and instead people are reaching to them asking if they're interested in that position or they want to interview for that spot. I think that's really key. And like James said, we come with so much technical background. We know how to learn. We can adapt and move into the field. But those soft skills really are kind of what I think we need to bring out. Kind of the focus that we work on in VetSec is kind of threefold on the soft skills. It's the how to interview, it's the how to build a resume, and it's the how to professionally network. We started a mentorship program that's kind of in its beginning phases, where you can ask for a long-term person that's in a field you're interested in, or an expert in a topic that you want to learn more about. Whether it's, I've had people ask for a mentor to help them with the disability process, or things like that, where it can be a person that they talk to every week or every other week to just get that connection going. And that has really helped out a lot of people.
Your point on networking there, Tom, as well, was really, really key. It's not just about getting a job. Networking is so much more than that. Your ability to understand the industry, the companies, the cultures, the visions, the tech stacks, what's trending, what's not, and the people, targeting people at various positions, so you get a good understanding, a holistic visual, as well as a verbal and sort of cognitive understanding of what's going on is so important. And the mentors as well, they don't just need to be in cyber. It's good to have a varied group of mentors, and don't just go for one, go for more. Even if it's someone in your family, it doesn't matter. If they're a professional and they can give you some sort of advice and guidance that's going to help in a positive way, then they make sure you've got that varied group of mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. Just going back to, learning how to be direct, that you don't have to learn that from somebody in the cybersecurity industry. Anybody that's in the professional world can help with that. There's a lot of personal skills that can be taught. You don't have to just pick one. Absolutely.
And that actually is a great segue, Tom. So veterans that are on here right now that are trying to transition in, and they're feeling overwhelmed, or they don't have the right network. I know for me, it took me a little bit of time, and I had to be extremely intentional to build the network that I have today, filled with not just military, but the civilian sector and cybersecurity. And I was extremely intentional and focused about it. What is some advice that you can provide to a veteran that's listening to this that may feel like hopeless? Like, I want to transition in, I don't have a network. What are some things that they can do starting today to get them on that path? Tom?
Join a community. That's the first thing. Join a community and start early. I was very fortunate to be ending my career on shore duty for the Navy, so I've had a little bit of free time. So I started early and kind of researched military transition, cybersecurity, and Google, I think, was the first place I started, right? And thankfully found VetSec. But there's so many others. There's professional organizations from ISC Squared. There's, FBI's InfraGard to learn more about the industry. It isn't just talking to people, but gaining information however you can. Talk to people who have gone in your shoes beforehand. That's what I love about both Tech Vets and VetSec. I sit in Tech Vets Discord all the time and just see the chatter that goes by, because just by seeing what they're talking about, we're learning more about the industry out there.
100%. And James, I know you have something to add to that. Best way for veterans to be able to expand their network today, like things they could start doing right now.
Tom's mentioned the community bits. There's no point doubling up on that, but it is a critical aspect. And the veteran community is stronger than the standard military community, funnily enough. Lots of people want to reach out and give back. LinkedIn and your personal branding and your profile is also very, very important. It's a good place to start. You don't have to put all of your stuff on LinkedIn. You can put enough on there, but you can start off really easy by just putting a job title on that you fancy going for, and all of a sudden the algorithm will start pinging you jobs relevant. You can start looking at the type of job roles, what they're asking for. But if you're going to do LinkedIn and you're going to do it properly, there's lots of different hints and tips and tricks out there. You can look at LinkedIn's guidance as well. But essentially, you've got to get involved. Don't use it as a very transactional thing just as you're leaving the military. I'm just going to use it so I can get a job. Really be a part of your network. And if you're starting to post good stuff, you can do write-ups. You can do a blog post about your journey. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you're adding value to other people's networks, all of a sudden, it starts to grow your own network. If you're expecting to get a job within your first line of your network, you're looking far too close to the end of your nose. You would already have a job if your first line had opportunities available. It's about building that 2, 3, 4, 5 layers deep, and all of a sudden you get opportunities where someone will put you in front of someone else. And that is really, really important. Word of mouth in the veteran community is incredibly strong. Everyone will want to help you. And actually, the amount of times that I got my CV beyond the sift, it didn't even go into the CV filter. It got put straight onto the hiring manager's desk as the shortlist. And that was just because I did enough work with the individual, taking them to coffee, having a chat with them. My LinkedIn was the start point of all of that.
Yeah. And Charmaine, I want to pivot that question a little bit for you, for veterans that are wanting to transition in and they want to get into the consulting space. They want to get maybe not so in the technical space, but working with clients one-on-one in front, and the client facing. What would be the best advice that you could provide them?
Well, so there's actually a number of resources available to veterans today, right? So I don't know if any of the transitioning veterans on the call right now are aware of programs such as Hiring Our Heroes. So Hiring Our Heroes is a program that people can enter into as they're in the process of transition, where they can apply to ultimately be in a fellowship, which is really just a training program that you can participate in. I think it's about 6 to 8 weeks, and you get immersed into day-to-day work outside of the military. And typically at the end of the process, the company that you're partnered with could potentially provide you an offer for once you are fully transitioned, you can join the company right after. So those are really great opportunities. I also think, taking advantage of the free cybersecurity education out there, seeking out certifications, really just increasing your knowledge in cybersecurity. If you're super brand new, never have touched cyber, and you're just trying to find a way in, education is going to be number one. It's going to be key. I also encourage everyone to look into the National Institutes of Standards and Technology, NIST. They have a lot of really great resources, from education to frameworks. So cybersecurity is really centered around the cybersecurity framework, controls. It's, really the foundation of all of cybersecurity in the federal space as we know it. So definitely encourage folks to take a look at NIST, all of those resources. Really just take that time to educate yourself on cybersecurity concepts. And from there, you can kind of gauge like where you're really most interested. I will say, as a veteran, you are a cleared professional. Right now, having a secret clearance and above is a hot commodity. There are so many companies out there looking for people like you who need people like you to operate, right? So, don't worry about being able to find a job, because you will. If you are a cleared professional and you have some basic understanding of cybersecurity, you will find a job. The need is too high right now. Amazon, for example, or AWS recently won like a multi-billion-dollar contract with the DoD, and they need to hire like thousands of people to keep their operations running. So, based on what like James and Tom mentioned, network, gain better understanding, work towards being that expert in a specific domain, right? You can't tackle all of cyber. It's too big and broad. Find a subset or like a specific area that you want to focus in, and do like me, drink through the fire hose and learn. And then of course, last but not least, don't be afraid to be uncomfortable. If you don't know everything, that's okay. You'll learn, as long as you can show the people that you're talking to and that you're interviewing with that you can adapt, that you're resourceful, that you're willing to learn. That's really all that's key.
I love that. So many good points right there. James, Tom, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I suppose, there's a reason why Tom and I work so closely together. I think that both organizations are incredibly well principled and build on very strong foundations where everything is about the community and nothing is monetized within that community. There's no subscriptions or fees. There's no recruitment fees to employers that hire from the community. So essentially, everything is about them. And that principled approach is why, that's why I worked with Tom. I mean, that's exactly it. So I think if you go to VetSec, everything in there is all about you, and that there's no hiding there. That is exactly it. So you've got that trustworthy community. It's all about what is best for you. There is no one that's skimming off the top of the salaries. There's no one that's taking fees or something in the background with recruitment. You know exactly where you stand with them. Additionally, if you're getting into cyber, sometimes you may have to just take a hit. If you want to go through a technical route, you've got to learn to be a technologist, and that can take time. Sometimes there's an easy way of doing that, or an easier way of doing it is to aim for those entry-level roles first. System administrators, network engineers, those sort of roles where you can go in and learn the trade, but you'll learn a lot quicker than everyone else. You're still doing stuff around security, but that's an easier way if you've got a shorter time span. But you've got to learn technologies. Bootcamp courses can be really good and really beneficial, but learning over a longer period of time, learning to solve technical problems with technical skills, you've got to do that learning properly. You've got to get your hands dirty. You've got to fail. You've got to break stuff and fix it again. And I think that's really important, and you should be used to that in the military anyway. If we get hands-on, that's generally how most of us like to learn. So make sure you take the time to learn as much as you can. And things like the immersive labs that VetSec has, the phenomenal opportunity to get your hands on some lab work there. Really, really good, engaging training. That's the sort of stuff that you really want to get into if you're just starting out.
I love that. And then I know that we're coming close to time, so I want to pivot really quick. And Tom, I want to ask you this question that Michael dropped into the chat earlier. He's been dropping a few, so I definitely want to get to this one. And then from there, we'll do final thoughts and do a quick wrap. So Michael was asking, how do you find the dichotomy between networking, aka it's not what you know, it's who you know, and having the minimum knowledge, understanding, and practice to land that job? I felt like this was a really good question, because it's like, how do you get into the space? Because you can't fake it to make it. James, you said it. Charmaine, you said it. I mean, I feel like when you enter this space, it's information by fire hose regardless. So how do you find that finite balance, Tom?
So I agree with you. It's not, you can't fake it to make it, for sure. And there's definitely a balancing act between the networking and having that knowledge understanding. But how many of us have gotten creative with our resumes? How many of us have gotten creative with our background, for instance, when they're filling out a CISSP application and they have to figure out how standing a topside watch with a gun contributes to physical security of an information system, right? There are skills that translate into the field, and so many veterans don't realize they have them already. That's where the creativity gets, and the balance on that minimum understanding. Charmaine made a great point. You're going to drink from a fire hose. That's not faking it to make it. That's learning as you go. Right? You are going to, once you get past the interview and get the job, you're going to use Google. You're going to look things up. You're going to figure out and teach yourself, because we have that skill set, and you have to prove to the employer that maybe you can't do all of the things in the job description on day one, but you can certainly rise to the occasion and teach yourself to do them and learn how to do them. On the networking piece, so many people have told me once you get your foot in the door, it's downhill from there as far as being able to move and pivot to other roles. It's that first barrier that you're trying to break through. And that's what we're helping to try and do, both with Tech Vets and VetSec. James, thank you so much for your kind words about VetSec. Everything James said, and just as much over at Tech Vets. It's a wonderful organization. And Charmaine, thank you for bringing up Hiring Our Heroes, because that's also a great organization to get skills on your way out the door. Onward Opportunity is another one I wanted to mention really briefly. There are a lot of organizations that try and help in those last 6 months of service with discounts or free offerings for certifications and training. Really, kind of the other piece I just want to touch on really quickly is the DoD Skill Bridge program. For transitioning military, through Hiring Our Heroes and other organizations like 50 Strong, you can intern at a company as long as your command can support for up to your last 6 months of service. And that is an amazing way to get that practical experience. One of my VetSec members, Tyler, has been in the chat talking about other things you can do, like try Hack Me and Hack the Box to gain practical experience. And James touched on immersive labs. There's a lot of things that you can do to translate and put on your resume that you have that experience. And SkillBridge is a great way to get your foot in the door at an employer as well. There's also, please don't spend $8,000 on a SANS course out of your pocket. There are so many other ways to get resources like that. Join a community, join Hiring Our Heroes, join VetSec, join Tech Vets, and we can help with those processes too.
I love that, Tom. Thank you. Yeah. And I actually threw in there SANS. They have a scholarship academia program for veterans coming out of active duty. You have to be out. There's certain requirements. I threw the link in there. Check it out. But I know we're on time. I want to do a quick wrap, but I want to go around and final words from each of you. James, we'll start with you. Just final thoughts that you would like to provide to the viewers.
It's definitely not about hacking. There is so much more to cybersecurity than that. Do your research. There are some incredible roles working with the human side of cyber, with project management, with building stuff, selling stuff. Sales is a great career to go into. Some of the commission you get, amazing. So really do your research and look for what you want to do, not following sort of Hollywood buzzwords, connotations of big bucks attached to it. Find out what really appeals to you, and then use VetSec to help you get there. If you're in the US, if you're in the UK, then Tech Vets.
I love that. Tom, final thoughts.
Yeah, the biggest thing I just want to say to everybody out there is you're not alone, right? There are 4 people here, 3 people here. I'm not quite there yet that have gone through this process, right? There are so many more. James, how many members are over in Tech Vets now?
3,204, and around 23% of those are veterans in industry.
Yeah, so 4,136 in VetSec right now. Those are all military veterans who are transitioning or have already made it into the field in cybersecurity. So you're not alone. Please reach out to any of us. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Twitter. Connect with our companies, and we're here to help. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then Charmaine, final thoughts.
Sure. So one thing that kind of came to mind, right? So when we're transitioning from the military, we often come from a place where our rank is determined by, time and grade, right? The amount of time we've spent in the military. And a lot of times people want to be in a new environment or a new space at that same level. I left the military as an E8. When I came out, I knew that I couldn't be a senior leader in an industry that I had zero knowledge about, right? Be willing to start a little lower so that you can learn the process and learn the skills necessary to be where you want to be. So, not to say we have to start all over, but if you're brand new to cybersecurity, don't be afraid to step, down a little bit, if you will. And it's really not a step down, right? You're learning a brand new industry, brand new skills, a brand new domain, and it's going to take time.
That was probably amazing. That was like my best. Not that Tom and James, your point wasn't the best of the best, but I think that's a critical point. And I'm glad we're ending on that note to say, you're not starting over, but it's okay to take a couple of steps down if you're coming out as like an E8. So that was great. Thank you. Thank you, Tom, James, Charmaine, for your guys' time. Tons of people in the chat are thanking you all for your time. So this has been wonderful. You guys.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks. Really good.
Absolutely. I'm going to take you all off the stage now. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right. Wow. That was awesome. So thank you all for joining again and joining in on the live. I know we've kind of run over. And right after this, if you aren't over there already, we've got Simply Cyber kicking off. So hop over to Simply Cyber. I want to talk really quick about what we've got going on next week. So Outpost Gray, in partnership with Grant Thornton, we are doing a highlight series. And one of the highlight series is called the Female Voice of Innovation and Technology. And what that is one time a month, we will be highlighting one woman that is doing outstanding work in the technology and the innovation space. And next week on Thursday, we are highlighting Alyssa Knight. And if you don't know her, you need to go just Google Alyssa Knight. You will find her. She is impacting this space, and she has been for many years. She's a hacker, she is an author, and she's a producer. So don't want to miss that episode. It's going to be live as always, so you can do live Q&A with her. And then the following week, I'm really excited. We've got Will G on the show, and we're going to be talking about the impacts of threat research with emerging technology. And we're going to hyper focus and talk about quantum computing and what that's going to look like in the future. So you guys, thank you as always. Let me hide that banner. I'm going to get this sucker out of here. And then I'm going to see you over at Simply Cyber. Have a good one.